Welcome. So glad you guys are here. My name is Drake. I'm the lead pastor here at City Church, and it's an honor to have you here with us today. We are continuing a series called He Would Love First, and this is going to be week 4, and we have been answering the question, what would Jesus do? If you remember the throwback of the bracelets back in the day, we now have some new bracelets. They're out on the Next Step desk for you. We'd love for you to grab one and hang on to it. And so we believe the answer to the question, what would Jesus do, is that he would love first. And we've been unpacking that for a while. It's been awesome for me. Heard some really cool stories about how God's been using it. If you want to catch kind of the front end of this, the first 3 weeks are online, and today we're kind of transitioning our conversation as we look at what Jesus is inviting us into. And so, hey, just as we get going, if you're a guest with us, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to hang out with us. I want you to know this is a safe place. Everyone's loved, welcome, and safe here. One of our values is that you don't have to believe to belong, and I want you to know we mean it. We mean it. And so this is a really safe place, no matter where you came in on your spiritual journey, to come along with us, to take next steps, and man, we're all going to leave here better than we showed up. So super grateful to have the time with you. All right, question for you. You ready? This is an easy one. Who wants to experience their best life possible? Ready to go? Raise your hands. Okay, yeah, that was easy. All right, very good. Like, no one's like, I'm going to settle for mediocre. This life, I'm not really looking to get much out of it. I just kind of want to coast through. And no, everyone, right? Now, listen, I'm not going to propose tonight that I can, give you your best life, okay? But I believe the conversation we're going to have is a huge factor in you being able to live your best life. So I'm going to give you a statement, and I think you're going to agree with me. And if you don't, just don't say anything, okay? And it's this: life is meaningless without relationships. And listen, think about it. Life is meaningless outside of the context of relationships. And this is true whether you're a Jesus follower or not. Why? Because think about every significant pursuit that we have on the planet today. Think about everything worth chasing, everything that we do, even when it comes to school and career and jobs and the places we go and the things that we do. Everything that we pursue in life, disconnected from relationships, carries very little to no meaning. And the reason I know that, and the reason that you know that, is because all of us have heard stories of people that have spent their life chasing something that causes them to lose their relationships along the way, and how they get to the end of whatever they were chasing, they get to the top of that ladder that they were climbing, and because they lost everything else in the process, they find themselves depressed, they find themselves lacking and wanting. We know tons of stories, unfortunately, of people committing self-harm or suicide as the result of getting to the top of the ladder but being empty. Why? Because every significant pursuit in life, no matter what it is, disconnected from relationships, falls terribly short. And what's unique about this conversation that I'm inviting you into today as we talk about community is that Jesus raises the bar, not just that community is significant and you have people around you that are going to breathe life into you and things like that, but for the last couple of weeks, Jesus has been demonstrating and inviting us into this big idea that the life of a Jesus follower is all about relationships. And I don't know where you walked in and if you heard about Jesus and church and religion and you think that, Jesus is attached to all of these religious do's and don'ts, but very clearly from the life and the teachings of Jesus, it's all about relationships. Now, why is this conversation important and why do we need community? I believe the answer to that question is because every single person in this room and every single person on the planet is made in the image of God. Let me show you. Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. Check this out. This is very beginning. God's creating the world and that whole shebang, okay? And God says, it just went like that. I'm sure he called it a shebang, okay? And God said, check this out. Ready? What's that next word? Us? Make human beings in our image to be like us? Okay, hold on. You hear the plurality here? Who the heck is with God in the middle of this? Who's he talking to? Ain't nobody else around? Here's the cool thing. God, I don't know what your paradigm of thinking about God has been or presented up to this point, but over and over again, the God that Jesus invites us into relationship with is a relational God. He's not just this superpower out there alone by himself hanging out in whatever kind of nether space we imagine in our minds. He is a relational God, and over again, we see God as three persons in one. So we have God the Father that Jesus talks about a lot, God the Son, that is Jesus, Jesus and God the Holy Spirit. Now, listen, we're not camping on that today, so if that confused you, we can talk later. But God is consistently in community of himself. And so when he goes to create humanity, and when he says, hey, let's make humans in our image to be like us, you hear the plurality in the community, yes? Okay, so let me show you something else. Right after this, Genesis chapter 2, verse 18, as God is creating humanity, he looks at humanity and he says, it's not good for the man to be alone. Now, that word in the Hebrew, not good, it means it's not the best. It's not like God created, humanity is like, uh-oh, I made a mistake. No, that's not like that. It's like this is not the best scenario for him. Why? Because we were created for relationships. God is relational in nature, and when we are created in his likeness, we are created for relationships. So have you ever noticed that every human being on the planet has a need for significant relationships? You probably heard stories about how babies in orphanages, outside of attention and care and community around them, can actually pass away because of the lack of touch and love and nurturing. We see it from the very beginning of life, the need for relationships. Disconnected from your idea of Jesus, we see the need in humanity. And here's what I want to propose today, that none of us can live our best life, because it's not good, it's not the best. None of us can live our best life separated from community. So the last couple of weeks, we've been camping on our relationship with God, and I would encourage you to go back and listen. It's been really, really helpful. But before anything else, before any other priority, before any other focus, what we've said is Jesus invites us into a relationship with God. And hear me, not religion, not religious activity, not a list of rights, wrongs, rules, and regulations, but a relationship with God. And he invites us not only to know God, but to know him relationally and intimately, not to cognitively just know about God, which is where religion gets us stuck sometimes, but rather invites us into relationship. And friends, can I just encourage you with this? This church can't change your life. And religion can't change your life. And even good community, it can't change your life. But Jesus can. In fact, I would propose that Jesus is the only one that can bring significant change to each of our lives. It's because what he did for us, inviting us into relationship with God, no one else has done or could ever do. Now, that's where we started. That's where we've been camping for a couple of weeks, and it's really, really important. But today, I want to invite us into a transition. Following Jesus, the focus, the primary source is out of our relationship with God that we spend our time. But following Jesus is not just about our relationship with God. You see, while my relationship with God might be personal, while individually I can't make you have a relationship with God, I can't, do it for my neighbors and my friends and my kids. A decision to come into a relationship with God is personal. Are you with me? While it might be personal, it is not meant to be private. I come into a relationship with God personally, and I get to enjoy and experience that relationship personally, but it's not meant to be lived out privately. And here's what's unfortunate, is that many people have been exposed to an idea of church that looks like a building, looks like a service, looks like a thing that you come to and do, and it has a lot to do with checking off a box or maybe being a little bit encouraged and kind of having just something more to do under your belt, or maybe there's some guilt and shame associated with it. And church turns into this organizational thing that you do rather than a community that you're invited into. And friends, the word that we see in the New Testament over and over again that Jesus invites us into, that word church is the word ecclesia, and it literally means a gathering together. It has nothing to do with a building. We could go on a hike and be the church. We can go in my home and be the church. And it's not to discredit what happens here, for the record. But we've been taught in a Western culture that the church is a building and a service time when Jesus invites us into so much more. So here's what I want to propose to you this morning. That when Jesus invites us into community, when he invites us into a relationship with him, Jesus and the New Testament know nothing of a Christianity, and they know nothing of following Jesus separate from community. Let me show you, Acts chapter 2, verse 41. This is right after Jesus was crucified, he was buried, he rose again, 500 witnesses saw him, and so this new church is being born, and it's amazing what's happening as you read the book of Acts. Right after Jesus leaves, Peter, one of his bros, one of his close guys, is sharing the message of Jesus with a huge crowd, and it says, those who believe what Peter said about Jesus and that he gave his life to bring us into a relationship with God, those who believe what Peter said were baptized and added to the church that day, about 3,000 in all. Now that word added, by the way, that's a lot of people. That's a whole bunch of people, right? They were added. What that means is that they were joined together, added to the family, if you will, okay? It wasn't like an attendance roster that people got added to and all of a sudden, cool, me and God are good. I'm going to go to church every now and then. It's going to work out great. They were added to a family. And when you and I choose to trust in Jesus, what happens is Jesus actually uses a language of what it means to come into a relationship with God. He calls it being born again in John chapter 3, if you want to go check it out on your own later. Jesus said, hey, if you want to come into a relationship with God, you have to be born again. Now, everyone in here has been born into a family, yes? Everyone has a biological family in the room? Yep, okay, case you do, case even if they're not present and active in your life, everyone's got a biological family that they were born into. So Jesus, to put it in terms that we could really wrestle with, he uses language that we can familiarize ourselves with. So he says, hey, just like you've been born physically, just like you were born into a family on this planet, you need to be born again into God's family. You and I are born separated from God. We're born spiritually dead, if you will. And so Jesus said, I came so that you might be born spiritually alive. And that idea of being born again, if you will, that is being adopted into God's family. It's a relational and a familial term. And so here's what all that means. If you and I are trying to live out a relationship with God that is separate from his family, right, in the beginning we see it's not good. It's not the best. Every book, if you just kind of crack open the New Testament, every book in the New Testament is either addressed to a community of Jesus followers or it's addressed to affect a community of Jesus followers. The book of Romans is written to the church in Rome. The book of Ephesians is written to the church in Ephesus. The book of Philippians is written to the church in Philippi. These are all just different cities and different people gathered together, living life together. And so here's what I want to do. I want to have a conversation with you today around three big realities around community. Three big realities. We're going to talk about community being where we find our best life. I want to give you three big realities. You ready? Oh, man. All right. You got to be more ready than that. You guys ready? Yeah. All right, man. Come on. Holy moly. Here we go. All right. Number one, because I have a relationship with God. Now, this is to a follower of Jesus, okay? If you find yourself not a follower of Jesus today, and you're kind of on the outside looking in, maybe you're skeptical, maybe you've been burned by the church, maybe you don't know what or why you believe necessarily at this point, what I want to invite you into today, as we have this conversation, pay attention to what Jesus is inviting us into. Pay attention to what Jesus is prioritizing when it comes to church and community and the family of God, if you will, and weigh it up against maybe some of your preconceived notions and your bad experiences, and maybe we can let some of those off to the side, and it could change some of the disposition of our hearts when it comes to this conversation, okay? Because I have a relationship with God, I now have a relationship with God's family. Let me show you. John chapter 1, verse 12. This is from one of Jesus' really close followers. He says, but to all who believed him, that's Jesus, and accepted him, he gave the right to become children of God. That word right is a judicial term. It means liberty and authority to become children of God. Let me show you a picture. This is Daniel and Michelle and their family. Daniel's our worship arts director. He was up here leading. Michelle is in here somewhere, which is hardly ever happening. That's awesome. And Michelle is our director of operations. She also runs our kids, so you get to meet them. They're on our staff. And Michelle and Daniel, they've been involved in foster care for a majority of their marriage. And in the process of being foster parents, they've had the privilege of adopting two little girls. Look at these two little girls down here at the front. Oh my goodness. Now listen, you might not know them, but you get to see them after service. This is Addison over here to the left with the little pink something, and then Abigail with the little bear. They are so little here and so cute. And when you get to know the real them, you're like, I'm just kidding. They're great kids. So through the foster care, you see the other kids that they were fostering at the time as well. And so what happened this day is they had the opportunity, this judge declared judicially that Abigail and Addison had the right to become children of the Hessler family. Now, what that means for these little girls is that when this judge made that declaration that they have the right to be their children, that everything that belongs to Daniel, everything that belongs to Michelle, now belongs to these two girls. While they might have been in the foster care system and being cared for, the relationship dynamic legally changed at the point when they adopted these two little girls. Can we give them a hand, by the way, because that's some super awesome work. Super awesome work. We have many people in our church that are passionate, and there's a huge need in the foster care system to be able to love and serve in our community, and I love that they've modeled that so well for us. But here's why I share this with you. Is when it comes to this conversation, the moment that you and I put our faith in Jesus, what John is telling us is that Jesus gives us the right to become children of God. What that means is that everything that is God's, I now have access to. The entire family of God, all the power of God, everything that God has is now at my disposal as a child, as a son or a daughter of God. Are you guys here? This is a big deal, right? This is a game changer that Jesus gives us the right. Now listen, these two little girls, they didn't earn it. They didn't deserve it. They didn't perform their way into this family. It was simply by the initiated love of their parents that they made it into this family. And the same invitation is true for every single person in the room, every single person on the planet, that Jesus paid all the adoption fees. And when we trust in him, we are adopted into the family of God and given the right to everything that our dad has access to. Come on, you guys with me? This is huge. So here's what happens. This is a big game changer when it comes to our relationship with God. Let me show you in Romans chapter 8. Now, this is a new guy. His name is Paul. Became a Christian later in life after he was first a Christian killer, trying to shut down the church, trying to shut down the Jesus movement, meets Jesus, becomes a follower of Jesus, gets adopted into the family of God, and here's what he pins, trying to encourage us with the same idea. So you and I have not received a spirit that makes you fearful slaves. Can I be honest? There's a lot of people that think that that's what a relationship with God looks like. I'm going to give my life to God, and I'm scared that I'm going to get zapped or squished or whatever, and I got to live my life in a certain way to where I make him happy by the right things that I'm doing and avoiding the wrong things. Paul says, no, don't get it wrong. You didn't receive that spirit. Instead, you received God's spirit when he adopted you as his own children. Now we can call him Abba, Father. That's a term of endearment. That's like saying Daddy, for his spirit joins with ours to affirm that we are children of God. So listen, friends, this is why this is so important. If you have ever, in any moment in your life, said yes to Jesus, Jesus, I believe in you. I believe you died for me. I want to give my life to you, and I want to follow you. If at any point in time you've made a decision to trust in Jesus for what he did for you, to bring you into God's family, this is the truth for you and I, that we are emphatic, done, a part of the family of God. You don't earn it. You don't deserve it. You don't maintain it. You don't perform your way into it. But rather, because of your position as a son or a daughter, you get to enjoy this relationship. Here's the good news. You belong to the family of God. And for some of you, family is not a good word. And for some of you, there are big gaps in this conversation. And for some of you, you've been around a lot trying to belong and never had the privilege of belonging for all kinds of different circumstances. And I don't know your past or where you come from, but can I tell you this? No matter where you find yourself, no matter what your past looks like, you belong here. And more importantly, you can belong to the family of God. And here's where some people get stuck. You might be sitting here, you're like, man, that's pretty good news. That's pretty cool. If I don't got to earn it or deserve it or maintain it, like if I can just kind of accept it and it all happens, and then that's great. But then the question comes up, so do I have to be a part of his family? You know, like I like God and stuff, but do I have to like them too? You know, I don't know how I feel. So here's the question. When you get married, anybody married in the room, raise your hands. Okay, raise your hands. Okay. How many of you guys are familiar that family comes with the deal, right? Whether you want it to or not, right? Family comes with the deal. Listen, The second you give your life to Jesus, or if you've already done it, you become a part of the family. Family comes with the deal. And so if you said yes to Jesus, guess what? You said yes to me, and you are so welcome. I am so glad. And you said yes to your neighbor, whether you wanted it or not. So this is not really a decision to make when it comes to the family conversation here. Here's what happens. Some of you have had bad experiences. Some of you have had negative experiences when it comes to church and the family of God thing, and I get it. And so you walk away from that burned and hurt, and in the same way that you can have a negative experience in your real life biological families. But let me ask you a question. Just because of a bad experience or a bad example, does it mean that you throw out the entire paradigm? Right? Just because you had bad parents or an absent father or an abusive childhood or any of the baggage that comes with a broken family dynamic, just because you came out of a dysfunctional family, does that mean that you can't have a good family in the future? Does it mean that you can't have a good marriage in the future? Does it mean you can't have a whole family in the future? No. Does it make it hard? Absolutely. But it doesn't negate that a healthy family can be a good family. It doesn't negate that this could still be the best, regardless of how bad this was over here. And I think the same thing happens with people in churches. We've had negative experiences when we were growing up, or it's our parents or our families, or we know people who play the church game and they don't live like Jesus and love like Jesus, and they're hurtful and hateful. And so then we kind of run away from that in community because it scares us off. And I understand. And for the record, before you think I'm inviting you into this perfect family, City Church has never claimed to be a perfect family. In fact, if you hang out with me long enough, and you're going to hear me say this all the time, if you hang out with me long enough, I'm going to irritate you. I might have already done it in the first couple minutes that we're here. I'm going to irritate you. I'm going to frustrate you. To be honest, I'm simply going to let you down. And the proof in that pudding is just talk to Danielle, talk to my wife, okay? We've been married for 9 years, and she is the most familiar person with all of those words. Thank God she hasn't left me, okay? It's the reality, right? That when we choose relational investment, one of our values is consistent transparency. That we recognize the need to be together through relational investment, but because of being together, there's going to be conflict because none of us are perfect. And so we've got to embrace consistent transparency if we're ever going to stick this thing out and actually love one another. You guys ever seen on the Discovery Channel, or maybe you like watch a documentary on Netflix or something when, it's like the lion crouching down in the savannah and then like all the gazelles over here hanging out, right? You ever watch those? And you're hoping that this turns out awesome. And so what's the lion? The lion's over here and he's doing his thing. And he's sneaking up and there's like a herd of gazelle over here. Let me ask you a question. How's it go for that one dude hanging out there by himself? Right? Every time. Right, that lion's coming and he sees the one dork over there, right, like all by himself, away from community. Everybody else gets away, and what's the lion? He's got dinner, baby, dinner. Peter, one of Jesus' closest friends, wrote about the devil, and he talked about, listen, you have an enemy. Whether you're a follower of Jesus or not, you have someone who hates you and your soul and hates everything good that can even remotely bring glory and honor to God. And so he's looking, Peter said, he's like a lion prowling around, looking for someone to devour. And so when you and I get separated from community, when you and I isolate, and listen, if you're a follower of Jesus, just because you're a part of God's family doesn't mean that you're connecting in God's family. You're with me? Right? Like some of you have extended family you haven't seen in a long time, right? So you recognize the difference. Just because I'm in the family doesn't mean I'm actually connected in community. But every time someone else gets out there by themselves, man, it's a train wreck waiting to happen. You know what it is? It's not good, right? That's the whole thing. It's not the best life. So as we have this conversation, when I come into relationship with God, I am also coming into relationship with his family. You know what the beautiful thing about this is? Is that every other church in Boulder that's lifting up Jesus and would call themselves Jesus followers, you know what? They're your family too. Our friends that we support in the Philippines through the Feeding Center and planting churches, you know what? They're your family too. Our friends that are meeting Jesus in Africa and China and all over the world, you know what? They're your family too. When you read the Bible and you read the stories in Acts and in Hebrews and in the Old Testament, you know what? Anyone that you read about that put their faith in Jesus, you're just reading your family history. Because anyone at any point in time that puts their faith in Jesus becomes a part of God's family. And as a result, your family and my family. Last week we talked about humility being a key to the equation here. And humility is simply saying this: I might not even want it. I might kind of be sideways about it. My emotions might not be in the game. But God, I need you. Last week we just said, man, very simply, if you can get to that place, can I be honest with you? That's about the only prayer I prayed all week, a couple days in a row. God, I need you. God, I need you. God, it's like I couldn't muster any more than that. It's been a hard week for me. God, I need you. And I'm trying, right, to get my heart there, and God, I need you. That's been a helpful prayer for me because I wouldn't know what else to pray. But you know what humility also looks like? I need you. I need you. I need you. I need you. Humility says, I need you too. Being a part of God's family means I get to be a part of not just a relationship with Him, but you as well. So here's the second point. It is impossible to be right with God and not with God's family. Check it out, John 14, verse 15. I'll show you how serious Jesus is about this. Jesus said, we looked at this last week, if you love me, emphasis on the love, okay? Hear it right. If you love me, the byproduct, the fruit, the overflow is that you will obey my commands. That simply means that we're going to live, love, talk, act, think like Jesus. The byproduct of a relationship with God is the overflow of letting Him work in and through me. Now, here's what's unique. We didn't talk about this last week, but Jesus says this very same statement 5 times in a row. 5 times. If you love me, you're going to obey my commands. If you love me, you're going to obey my commands. In case you didn't get it, if you love me, and John, the guy writing this, he's one of the guys in that circle as they're talking about it. And so then after 5 times, you might be asking like, okay, so what is your command, Jesus? Check this out. John 15, right after this, after 5 times of saying it, Jesus gives us the answer. This is my command. You ready for it? Love each other. Right? Like, I thought it was going to be like going to church or reading the Bible and giving some money and being a good person and not killing people. No. What does he say? Love each other. Now, killing people kind of falls into that, right? We're probably not going to do that if I love you. But you see the big overarching goal. Jesus said, listen, 5 times over and over again. If you love me, you know what that means? You love me, you're going to love the people around you. Why? Because I love the people around you. And the more I love Jesus, the more I love what He loves. And He loves you. And He loves you. And He loves my neighbor. And He loves that relative I can't stand. And He loves that boss that gets on my nerves. And He loves, you start filling in the blank. Jesus said, you love each other in the same way that I have loved you. The first obvious evidence that I am right in my relationship with God is this relationship right here. And some of you have been really, really hurt because someone talked a really good game right here and they didn't live it this way. Some of you are like me and you've talked a really good game and you haven't always done it very well this way. Now, there's lots of grace to say, hey, I don't have my stuff all together, but to realize the priority that Jesus places on the love that I have for my neighbors and my friends and my family. Let me show you another verse, 2 Corinthians 5:19. This is Paul again, and he's helping this new church understand what it looks like to live in community. And he says, for God was in Christ, that's Jesus, He was reconciling the world to Himself. That word reconcile, it means to bring 2 opposing relationships back together. So the whole purpose of Jesus coming to the planet was to bring all of humanity back into relationship with God, okay? He was reconciling the world to Himself, no longer counting people's sins against them. And He gave us this wonderful message of reconciliation. The beautiful thing about this conversation is Jesus didn't just come to make us right here in our relationship with God. He came to make us right here. And if you're like me, you know how hard this can be. Let me show you another one, 1 John. Now, this is one of Jesus' closest followers. We heard from him just a minute ago. But John is kind of like, He's not politically correct, so just get ready for him, okay? 1 John chapter 4, he says, if someone says, I love God, but hates a fellow believer, that person is a liar. Now, write that one down. You can go throw that at some people, right? You ready? Like, aha, I got you. You're a liar, right? So he just shoots us very straight. Man, if you say I love God, but you hate somebody else, you're a liar. For if we don't love the people we can see, how can we say that we love God who can't see? That's a good question, by the way. That's a really good question. And he has given us this command. John was there that day, and he brings it up again, the same thing Jesus just said. Those who love God must also love their fellow believers. And you might be here and say, you know what, Drake, I don't hate them. I just don't like them very much. I don't hate them. I just don't want to be around them like ever or see them or even think about them. But I don't hate them. Let me give you the definition of this word hate. This is going to hurt your feelings, by the way. Hurt mine, so just get ready. Hate, as defined in the Greek, is ill feelings that affect the way you act towards another. Dang it. That changes I wouldn't say I hate them, but I got some feelings. I'm in my feelings every now and then, okay? So you find yourself struggling with bitterness towards somebody, anger towards somebody, resentment, unforgiveness, which is easy to get stuck in. And you say, you show up and you lift your hands in worship, or you have your God time. I love God so much. But that stuff's going on in your heart. He says, you're just lying to yourself and the people around you. Jesus said, hey, you should love each other like I have loved you. You know how Jesus loved you? You ever thought about that? You know what he selflessly, sacrificially, when you didn't deserve it, when you definitely didn't earn it, ultimately giving his life. And you start filling in that category that Jesus wants me to love everybody else like he loved me. And if you're like me, you look at that and you say, dude, I can't. And you don't know what they've done. You don't know how that went down. You don't know. I just can't do that. And you're right. You can't. Neither can I. But what we've been talking about the last couple of weeks, if the life of a Jesus follower is not doing things for Jesus, but if the life of a Jesus follower is Jesus living his life in and through me, then I can. Because Jesus can. Let me show you how serious Jesus is here in Matthew 5. So if you are presenting sacrifice at the altar in the temple, if you show up at church and you want to sing some songs and lift your hands, and you suddenly remember that someone has something against you, got some conflict, got something that's not right in your relationships, what does Jesus say? Leave your sacrifice there at the altar. Walk out of the auditorium. Go make a phone call and a text. What does he say? Go and be reconciled to that person, and then come back to your gathering. Some pretty heavy stuff, Jesus. There's something unique that happens when you and I gather together. God can do some really cool stuff that's unique in this space. But have you ever noticed, I don't know, if you've been here a few times, like sometimes it's like God is just blowing it up and like amazing things are happening and we're experiencing God in a really cool way. And other times, like it's the exact same week, same flow, like nothing really different, but it's like God's not working as much. Could I propose, like, is it possible that sometimes we show up to worship God and he kind of puts a damper on our experience with him until we make our relationships right? Is it possible that the priority that God has for you when you walked in tonight is that there's a text message you need to send, a phone call you need to have, a relationship you need to engage because he loves you and he loves the person that you're in conflict with that much? Now, for the record, reconciliation doesn't mean best friends. Can we say that? Okay? You have to go get best friend rings and fix it all up, but here's the last thing. My relationship with God grows by participating in God's family. The word fellowship used in Acts chapter 2, we're going to look at in a second, is the word participating. And I think that's a better word. Like I don't use the word fellowship in my normal vocabulary. And so to participate in God's family, like to be honest, can we just be real for a sec? That kind of just means showing up sometimes. Like, hey, if you made it to the room, way to go. Like that's a big deal. Like if you made it to a city group this week, That is a huge deal. Sometimes showing up is the best part of being a part of a family. You see, here's what happens. It's my relationship with God that enables me to have a life-giving relationship with you and to fully enjoy my relationship with you. But it's my relationship with you that deepens my relationship with God. Why? Because the more that I get to know you, the more I find out about God. There are things in my relationship with God that I can never learn apart from my relationship with other Jesus followers. Last week we said that we grow to love God more when we know him more, by spending time with him. But one of the ways that we can get to know God is by getting to know one another. One of the things we say is that it's hard to meet each other's needs when we don't know each other's names. By the way, that's why we got name tags. You're welcome. Woo! Okay? In a minute, we're going to sing a song. In fact, I'm going to invite the band to come now. And as the band gets ready to come, we're going to sing a song. And the song is called So Will I. And one of the verses, it says, I've seen your heart 8 billion different ways. And it speaks to the creative image of God in every person on the planet. And the more community I have, the more I get to know God. Danielle and I have been married for 9 years. And can I just be honest? There's some stuff that I've learned being married that I couldn't learn any other way. Like, can I be honest? Like, there's some stuff that I needed to learn that no one loved me enough to tell me until I got married, right? Like, all of a sudden I get married, and Danielle doesn't have a problem telling me about all the stuff that needs to grow and change. And like, one of my things that I've been learning is, like, sometimes we'll be in a conversation, and then, someone will start a sentence, and I'll think that I know where they're going, and so then I'll finish their sentence for them, and I wasn't even close to where they were going. And so then Danielle will come to me and say, hey, babe, do you know that you, and then I'll interrupt her, and I'll finish her sentence, and then she'll get mad at me, and right. And so I had to have someone, like, first of all, that loved me, but also someone that has walked close with me for a long period of time to not only see that in me, but to help me process it. You see, there are some things in our life spiritually that need to grow. For you and I, there are some things that need to grow. And there's some stuff in my life and in your life that you can't see. Everybody's got blind spots, right? Everybody's got blind spots. There's some stuff that I can't see in my life that other people can see. And what happens is if all I do is pop in here on a weekend, if all I am is just periodically involved in community from a distance, then no one else can see it either. But if I make a decision to get into a city group and to connect in community and join a team, then all of a sudden other people around me have the opportunity to see the real me. And let me just debunk city groups, right? It's not like a blasting session. You don't show up and everybody like says what you suck at, right? That's not what happens. But you show up in community. There's people around you who love you enough to help you grow. Let me show you this last verse in Acts 2, verse 42. All the believers, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, fellowship, sharing in meals, and to prayer. And they worshiped together at the temple each day, met in homes for the Lord's Supper, shared their meals with great joy and generosity, all the while praising God and enjoying the goodwill of all the people. And each day, God was adding to their fellowship. There it is again, that participation of life together, those who were being saved. You know what's happening here? They became a part of God's family, and they just started getting together. There was no program. There wasn't this 5-step process. They just started living life together. Why is this such a big deal? Because you and I will never know God's best for us apart from community. We believe this so much that if you only have one time slot a week, if you can only give us one time slot a week, we're going to tell you to go to a city group before you come to a weekend gathering. That is hard for me to say. I just want you to know, you're like, whoa, but I believe it with all of my heart, man. If you only got one time slot a week, get into a group. You know what's amazing about this conversation? Is as we grow in our relationship with God and we grow in our relationship with one another, the world around us starts to get a glimpse of the love of God in real time. How do you know I'm real? I have a body, right? You can touch me. You can see me. Jesus would talk about the church as a body. How's the world going to know that the love of Jesus is real? It's his body. By seeing and experiencing the love of God working in and through you and in and through me. And what's going to happen over time is people are going to start to look at what God is doing and in through your community around you, and they're like, man, I don't know, but there seems like there's something to this Jesus thing. Because it's like I can see Jesus in them. It's that simple. Our relationship with God overflows in our relationship with one another. So here's my invitation for you. We're going to stand in just a moment. We're going to sing. And God might be doing a lot in your hearts, right? Maybe as we were talking, God put a relationship on your mind and you need to send a text. Maybe you need to step out in the lobby and have a conversation. Maybe you need to make a calendar appointment this week that you're going to have a phone call with somebody and start to work on that relationship. Maybe as you've been sitting here, you feel the need, like you kind of got that arm's distance thing going from community, and you're like, I don't know if I want people to know the real me. Man, can I just be honest with you? You're being invited into a loving family. It's not perfect, but it's committed to being a part of your best life. Maybe you're here, and you've never said yes to Jesus. And before any of this community, I told you in the beginning, man, this church can't change your life. But Jesus absolutely can. So maybe for the first time in your life, you would say, Jesus, I believe in you. And quite simply, I need you. I want to be adopted in the relationship with God. And if you would pray that on your own heart and mind today, I want you to have with confidence today that you can have a relationship with God and his family. Will you stand with me? I want to pray over us, and the band is going to lead us in some music. We're going to sing that song, So Will I, in just a moment, and I want you to let those words really sink in. One of the beautiful things about the songs we sing is they can also serve as prayers. And so let me pray over you right now. Will you bow your heads with me? Close your eyes for just a moment. God, thank you so much for what you're doing in this space. Thank you for the amazing community here at City Church and people that I know love me, that are committed to seeing my best life happen. And God, whatever you're doing in the room and in each of our hearts, man, would you help us take the next step? Deal with a relationship. Take a step of faith and get into a group. Or maybe for the first time, say yes to you in a relationship and then let somebody know. God, no matter what you're doing, we want to just say thank you so much because of what you did through the sacrifice of Jesus. That we could be adopted into the family and we can truly belong. We don't have to earn it. We don't have to maintain it, but we simply get to enjoy it. And I pray from this space, there would be an overflow in our Super Bowl parties and in our city groups and all the ways that we're engaging, that the overflow of your work in and through us would be a love that is contagious in our city. It's in Jesus' name.